When God humbles us, it sucks. It's embarrassing. It's like getting a cosmic spanking. But it's effective for one simple reason: it makes us aware of our pride. And once we're aware of it, we can do something about it. When I was in high school, I attended a weekly Christian fellowship called C2. So it was a good time for friends, family, family, I guess, food, and just exchanging testimonies and stories of how God was working in our lives at that moment or things that we wanted people to pray for. This one particular night, I was at C2 and it was time to go. My parents had just arrived to pick me up and they texted me, "Hey, we're here. Time to go. Say goodbye to your friends." And I acknowledged it. I said, "Okay, I'm coming," but then proceeded to keep hanging out, keep socializing for maybe another 5, 7 minutes or so, maybe even 10 minutes. I finally went out to the car when I was ready to go. Mistake number one. And got in the car. My parents were not happy. They proceeded to tell me, when we're here to pick you up, respect our time. We're on a schedule. We need to go. We need to get back home. We have stuff to do. And something possessed me to respond to them by saying, "Well, I'm not sorry because I was still talking to my friends and I wasn't ready to go yet." And I cringe every time I think about this story because I just cannot believe how arrogant and prideful and selfish and rude and just all these other things that I was in that moment. To my parents, who were completely in the right about what they were telling me. You are supposed to respect other people's time when you're at their mercy getting rides from them, of all things. So needless to say, I got a nice little talking to on the ride home and felt pretty small. You got reprimanded for just the way I mouthed off and just the bigger issue that was underlying everything, that just the pride that I had responded with. And reflecting on it years later, I realized that that was just the manifestation of a pride issue that had been present and that I'd been struggling with since childhood. I definitely would identify pride as the number one sin that I've struggled with from childhood to now. And I know this because I can reflect on my childhood and think about how I hated being corrected, could not stand it. I, even in my little 7, 8, 9-year-old brain, already had the answers and didn't need to be told anything. I often responded with, "I know," if my parents repeated something to me or told me something that I thought I could figure out or piece together myself. I was easily offended, overly sensitive to criticism. I had a hard time apologizing and admitting when I messed up. So just a whole bunch of flagship traits and characteristics that pointed to a very deep-seated pride issue. Now, are remnants of these issues still present in my life today? Absolutely, although to varying degrees. I can definitely say it's a night and day difference, though, between now and the way I handled pride while I was growing up. But yeah, I like now in my mid-20s, definitely am aware of it and do what I can to, when God brings up an issue that I need to address or confront, I'm quick to acknowledge that. But yeah, like I had to recognize pretty early on that pride was a serious issue in my life and that I had to do something about it. So that brings me to the whole topic and focus of this episode is about how God humbles us and what that might look like. And I have a couple stories to share with y'all. Well, just shared story number one, but I got another one coming at the end of the episode. And I have 2 reasons that God may humble us. These are not exclusive reasons, because I realize that I'm not going to think of everything out there. But these are 2 reasons that the Holy Spirit just put on my heart to share with you guys in this episode. So the first one being that, God may humble us because we have pride in our hearts that we need to deal with, which seems kind of like a, well, duh, obvious, statement. But what I was reflecting on as I was preparing this was Proverbs chapter 6 talks about the 7 things that God hates. And guess what's on the top of that list? Some translations say a proud look. Some say a haughty look. But at the heart of it all is pride. And I thought it was interesting because that's not the only place that the Bible talks about pride and how God feels about it. We can look at Lucifer, aka Satan, or the devil. And before he was the devil, as we know him today, he was Lucifer. He was a beautiful angel. He was adorned with such majesty and splendor and precious stones, and was just really just captivating in the way he carried himself and his beauty. And Lucifer knew that too, unfortunately, a little bit too well. He was feeling himself after a while, and he wanted to be God. He wanted to be worshipped like God was worshipped. He wasn't content to worship his creator. He wanted to be acknowledged and revered for his splendor and majesty. And, God knew this, of course, like he didn't take him long to figure that out. And so when God found out, that pride had taken hold of Lucifer's heart, he quickly threw him out of heaven along with 1/3 of the angels that Lucifer had persuaded to be on his side. So I've heard some pastors refer to pride as the original sin, no doubt probably referring to when Lucifer was thrown from heaven, but also we can see how pride played a role in Adam and Eve's story in the Garden of Eden. So Eve, in her exchange with the serpent, he convinced her to second guess what God had told her about not eating the fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. He told Eve, you will not certainly die, you'll just become like God, and he knows this, which is why he's keeping you from eating that fruit. And so Eve then took matters into her own hands and decided that she would come to her own conclusion about what God meant, and she was going to eat the fruit for herself. And then, of course, she goes and shares it with Adam, and then that's when the fall happens in Genesis chapter 3. But what these two issues have in common, these two stories, is that pride was at the root of it all. Pride is so dangerous because it convinces us to believe our own hype and to believe that we're awesome, that we know enough to make our own decisions, that we don't need any guidance or interference from the Lord. James chapter 4 verse 6 talks about how God opposes the proud but gives grace to the humble. So another scripture where it's just very clear how God feels about this particular sin and how he responds to it. So if it's an issue where God is humbling us and maybe pride is something that's taken root in our heart, God might choose to humble us by allowing us to fail at something, or to be publicly corrected, or he'll expose a weakness that we are dealing with that we thought we had overcome. Have you ever looked down your nose at somebody who was struggling with a sin that you were also struggling with, but you didn't want to admit that to yourself? Maybe you thought you overcame your anger issues or lying or lust or watching porn, but you were put in just the right situation with just the right circumstances, and those issues were brought to light, and God revealed to you in that moment that, wait a minute, you still struggle with that. So that's just one way, one of the two that I'm going to go over that God may choose to humble us is he'll allow us to be put in situations where we are not as strong or not as faithful or not as courageous as we like to tell people we are or tell ourselves that we are. And he'll use these situations to remind us of our dependence on him and to bring us back to the right focus in whatever we're trying to pursue. The second reason God may humble us is that maybe he's trying to help us shift our perspective in something or correct a blind spot that we have that we weren't aware of. So the example I'll use for this is comparing my college experiences at A&M versus where I currently am working and attending grad school. So at A&M, I was surrounded by students who came from wealthier, more affluent families with means, and who just, a lot of them lived a different lifestyle than what I had grown up with. And dropping out of college to take care of my family or to attend to some matters in the home, those never crossed my mind. Like I was in college to go straight through for 4 years and complete my degree. But now I'm working with students who are working full-time jobs. They're providing for their families. Maybe they're the sole breadwinners, or they've fallen on hard times and they're the only ones that can really take care of their family. And it's just such a stark contrast to the college experience that I had, which has made this job so humbling because I come in contact with students and build relationships with them, and they're living a completely different life in their late teens, early 20s than I ever did. And so it's just been very eye-opening to see the different struggles that my students walk through while still keeping their grades up and doing their best in class. It's just been extremely humbling, and I've thanked God for the chance to be exposed to that, because that is nothing like what I knew going to college. So, this example of how God might humble us to give us a perspective shift or adjust our attitude or whatever is needed in that moment, I think is very applicable to this other story I'm about to share with you guys. And this particular story was very pivotal in my development as a leader, as a person, as a follower of Christ. Lots of lessons learned and takeaways from this that have affected me to this day and just in my career progression so far. But this is the story of key leadership tryouts during my junior year in the Corps of Cadets at Texas A&M. And for those of you who have been following the podcast, you've heard me mention my time in the Corps on a few different occasions. But for those of you who are new or who are not aware of what the Corps is, it's essentially a military-style leadership organization. All of our activities, routines, scheduling, it's patterned after the military, and we actually work with retired officers who oversee the cadets' daily operations. So we learn customary military greetings, drill and ceremony, proper etiquette for greeting, or what? Yeah, I just said that. Just proper etiquette for conducting ourselves and, wearing a uniform properly, all those types of things. So, spring of my junior year, I went out for drum major of the Aggie Band and for commanding officer of my outfit. I'll start with drum major. This was very competitive. I remember at the time there were about 21, 22 of us that tried out, that had signed up to go out for it. And only 3 drum majors are picked. There is the head drum major plus 2 supporting drum majors. So extremely competitive. And there were 2 phases to the audition. Obviously, everyone's goal was to make it past the first cut because no one wants to be cut right away at the beginning. And I remember it was around this time of the year, actually. It was February of 2018 when we started. We first signed up and we started getting lessons from the drum majors who were already in the position. They were teaching us how to hold the mace, how to conduct, how to march with the mace, and just proper ways to carry ourselves while holding it and while conducting. So day after day, we would come out, a few groups of us at a time that would want to go practice and get some feedback from each other. And we continued in this way for several weeks. Then the first audition came around. And this audition was one of the most nerve-wracking things I have ever done to this day. I'm convinced that there will never be another panel interview, another tryout, another audition, another anything that will come close. I was auditioning in front of the single most intimidating band director I've ever met. This guy knows his stuff. He knew exactly what he was looking for, and that just heightened the stakes and the intimidation factor. I remember just randomly, I was in the audition doing decently well, I guess. I was so nervous and a lot of it was a blur, but I remember distinctly my left leg started shaking uncontrollably while I was conducting. I was trying to do the 3-4 and 4-4 and 2-4 and just, do what the different moves they were asking for. And my left leg just totally went rogue. I don't know what was happening or what triggered it, but needless to say, fast forward, they put out the results later that morning. I did not make it past the first cut. And yeah, I was disappointed, but, it was all good. Drum major out of the 2 positions that I was going for was more of the long shot, I thought. So I knew I had to focus my attention on commanding officer and just preparing for that. So this brings us to the commanding officer interviews, or CO interviews for short. So these had been happening around the same time as drum major. So we were preparing for both of these simultaneously. And just some background for why I went out for this position in the first place. I was the first sergeant of my outfit as a junior. So I was in a key junior position. I was in charge of a lot of different things. I helped a lot with communications, logistics, scheduling for outfit, day-to-day activities, and just the well-being of my cadets. And in a sense, the first sergeant would spend their junior year being groomed for the CO position. It was commonly expected that the first sergeant would move on to take over to be CO of their outfit as a senior. So I applied for CO, and I tried very hard to keep an open mind about how it would play out because I knew I had a few other buddies in my outfit, my peers, who wanted to apply for it also. So we went into the interview stage, like all of us that applied made it to the interview stage, and that I thought that it went very well. I knew the people on the panel, had good relationships with them, went in there, was honest, and just did my best. Well, I went back to my room that night, and I waited not so patiently for the current CO to come tell me that I had gotten the position. And that was just my hope and my expectation. I'm like, I think I really did well. I'm excited for this. I'm ready. Well, he never came by, and it was getting late. I thought maybe he was out and I would catch him the next day or something. And just before I get into just where this is headed, the Commandant of the Corps would often post, or he usually posted, the results of the key leadership auditions on Facebook. So it was a public forum. You could see who made it. You could see if you were right, like, oh, I knew they were going to get this. I was so rooting for him to get it. You know, all those things. So it's a nice little time of celebration when everyone learns. So I did not know that the announcement was going to go out on Facebook the very next day. I woke up and I was going about my day, and I heard from somebody that, hey, the results are out. You know, it's on Facebook. So I went on Facebook, checked, scrolled down all the way to the end where the band usually was, and was reading through all the results, and my name was not there. Out of all 6 first sergeants in the band that year, I was the only one who did not get promoted to CO. And I found this out. This happened the day after I found out about the drum major results. I was embarrassed. I was frustrated. I was disappointed, sad, discouraged. Every emotion on the spectrum, I think, went through my mind and my heart that day, that week. That was so tough because I had that was just hard. All these emotions just came crashing in. I had just gotten 2 back-to-back no's on these major positions that I was really looking forward to and wanted to go out for. I started thinking about how that would people view me as a failure of a first sergeant because I was the only one to not get promoted. People were going to wonder what went wrong, like what happened, and while these feelings were still fresh and raw, I had to make the decision to swallow my pride and go congratulate my buddy who had gotten CO for the coming year. That was one of the hardest things I had ever had to do. I had to put my feelings aside and celebrate the person who had gotten it. During the whole tryout process, I'd been praying, Lord, please keep me humble, not realizing what that was going to mean for me personally. Wow, so that was a tough time. And, I mean, I got to end this on a great note. I ended up getting EXO, or Executive Officer, so I was number 2 for the outfit for the coming year, and I was on bugle rank. So I was chosen to be one of 12 cadets that would lead the band through different formations and drills and all those things. So it was a super fun experience. So this was not a this is not a sob story or a self-pity moment or anything like that. Although in the moment I was feeling sorry for myself. But no, this all ended on a great note. But reflecting on it, I believe that God was just trying to show me that I did not have to be in that top position or in the forefront of everything to be a leader. He was trying to show me and to teach me that I could lead without being in the spotlight. And on a less serious note, he was just trying to remind me that you're not always going to get what you want. Like, when you go out for stuff, there's the expectation, there's a hope at least that you'll make it or you'll get that position, but there's always the reality that someone else is going to get it, and that's okay. That you have to be okay with that. Hebrews 12 talks about how God disciplines those that he loves. And when he takes the opportunity to humble us, that is a form of discipline. God is trying to expose or correct a behavior, an attitude, a way of thinking, something that needs to be worked out of us because he wants us to be more like him. So when God is humbling us, he's not vindictive. He's not trying to make us angry or stir us up or crush our dreams or anything like that. He just knows what's best for us. And this is hard to hear because we also want to believe that we know what's best for us. But that often ends up not being the case. We know what we want, and what we want and what's best for us don't often align. God also knows that pride is a very dangerous sin for us to succumb to because it causes us to believe our own hype and to put ourselves on a pedestal when really we need to be reflecting on how He is the one that increases us and promotes us and brings us to where we need to be. So when we're humble, which is what God wants for all of us, we are teachable and we can be more effective vessels for performing work for His kingdom. God can entrust humble people with greater responsibilities because He knows that in their heart, they're not going to rely on themselves to get the glory or to bring things to pass, but they're going to deflect all glory back to God, to whom it belongs. So, that's what I got for y'all. If you're struggling with pride, or you suspect that it might be something that's like the root issue of another sin in your life, just turn it over to God. Ask Him to make you aware of the areas that you're prideful in, and trust me, He will do it. It's not going to feel good, but it's necessary for growth. It's just one way that God helps to prune us and just get rid of everything that's not like Him in our lives. So I hope y'all enjoyed. Feel free to share this with your circle, with people who need to hear it. As always, you can follow me on social media. Instagram is lifeatpeace_podcast. Facebook is Life at Peace Podcast. And if you're just listening to this right now but would like to see the videos, my YouTube channel is Life at Peace Podcast. So the videos are always up there. And I will continue to bring out content for you guys bi-weekly. And thank you for the support so far. Looking forward to what 2023 has in store. But in the meantime, take care and enjoy the rest of your week. Peace.